guys, so it's me Alexis. Welcome back to my astrology channel, and today I'm going to be talking about the moon in Gemini. So before I gonna go into the video, as always, joke's on you, there is no poll this week because this series is almost done, which means I need to find a new series to start and I have no idea what to do. So you guys are gonna be great because you guys can tell me what you guys want to see because I'm stumped and I'm also pretty busy. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about that moon in Gemini. So when it comes to the moon in Gemini, let's start with Gemini first. Gemini is an air mutable sign ruled by Mercury. Now when you got an air sign is hot and wet. When you have anything that's hot, kind of imagine heat kind of radiating off of something, like they're kind of like, you know, moving outwards. That's because hotness tends to represent things that kind of manifest on the outside. So think of the, you know, external environment. And then when you got something that's wet, you have something that's connective. Think of something that kind of makes similarities, things that kind of stick things together. When I think of wetness, I think of glue. So yeah, that is air being hot and dry. In a literal sense, you could say that it's outside connections. And honestly, that pretty much sums up air in a good way because air tends to be known as like communicative, mental, rational, anything that kind of helps people connect with each other on the outside. So like logic, conversations, writing, all of that, communication. And speaking of communication, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of communication and speaking and thinking. Mercury, kind of think of like the messenger. He kind of sends a message, he kind of receives a message, he kind of is in charge of like exchanging. So if Venus is like connecting and Mars is separating, Mercury is just exchanging. Like, you know, no connecting, no separating, it's just pew, 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 pew. So yeah, that is Gemini in a nutshell. Wait a minute, I forgot about how Gemini is mutable. When you got a mutable sign, you got a sign that's very flexible, a sign that can kind of go all over the place, a sign that is very adaptable. Now, these signs are not really great at starting things or kind of keeping things, but they are good at accepting things the way they are. So in that case, you know, with a mutable sign, like even though they can't really have a grip on like certain things, they can kind of accept what comes at them and they kind of know how to accept when things are not going to go their way. And that's gonna be Gemini for you. Now, when you got the moon in Gemini, so think about, you know, emotions when it comes to the moon. With Gemini, when I think of Gemini, I think of like the student, the kid who really, really wants to learn, the kid that always asks like why all the time to the point where like the teacher gets annoyed. Yeah, that's Gemini. But at the same time, Gemini is that person that makes everybody laugh, a person who can really tell a good story, a person who's always wanting to learn something new. And also someone is kind of, you know, kind of inconsistent, kind of going all over the place. But because they're all over the place, you can't help but kind of like, you know, love them because they're never going to be boring. So yeah, that's like boring is the last thing I would ever think of for a Gemini. Now, that is the same when it comes to having your moon in Gemini. Now, let's kind of talk about how a Gemini moon would ideally like to process their feelings. You know, if you have a loved one or someone you really know with a Gemini moon and you kind of want to get closer to them, or you kind of feel like, you know, if you want to know how to handle their emotions whenever they're going through something tough, the first thing you need to do is sit and listen to their emotions. And once you listen, talk back. Like when it comes to a moon in Gemini, whenever they're sad, whenever they're feeling down, they need someone to vent to. Like they need to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about how they feel. Because when they talk, that's how they kind of understand their feelings. Sometimes, you know, feelings can be ambiguous, they can not make sense, sometimes they kind of go out of nowhere. When a Gemini moon starts to ramble how they feel as they're talking, they are also trying to like process and understand their emotions, but also kind of weaving a story to tell you. Because a way to really help a Gemini moon with their emotions is to have a conversation with them. So if you're a boring person, I'm sorry, but you are gonna suck when it comes to nurturing a Gemini moon, because a Gemini moon does need somebody who is entertaining enough to at least carry a conversation, especially if the Gemini moon kind of wants to vent and kind of wants to share their feelings. So as I said earlier, like when a Gemini kind of speaks and kind of vents to you, as they are talking, they are also trying to process their emotions and are trying to make it into a message. So there are a few implications with that, because in order to make a message, you need to know what you're talking about. In order to also send a message, you need to also find a way to package it so that the other receiving party can accept it. So I feel like with the Gemini moon, a lot of how they kind of express their emotions, it's kind of like wrapping a present. They gotta know the gift, and they gotta know how to wrap it, and then they gotta know how to send it. So here is when things get tricky when you're a Gemini moon. Sometimes if your emotions are too hard to understand, sometimes if your emotions are ambiguous, irrational, there's no logic to it, sometimes it's hard for you to kind of know like what you're feeling. So like if your feelings are a present, you don't know the gift inside. And that could be a problem if you don't know what's in it, because the person receiving that present, they may have a surprise, and it'll surprise both of you when it shouldn't surprise both of you. And I kind of brought in logic and rationality. As I said earlier, when it comes to you expressing your emotions, it's kind of like wrapping a present. When it comes to you understanding the gift of your emotions, you use rationality and you'll use logic. Because as I said, like when you express your emotions, it's kind of like telling a story. And a story is not enjoyable if it doesn't make sense. And for a story to make sense, it needs to have some sort of order, some sort of logic, some sort of rationality. However, sorry to disappoint you, Gemini, but sometimes your emotions cannot be a story. Sometimes your emotions can't be entertaining. Sometimes you can't just package your emotions into something where you can have a conversation with someone about it. Your emotions sometimes are not going to be easy to work with, and because of that, you're going to have to find other ways to process your emotions. Sometimes logic and rationality are not going to cut it, and you have to find other ways to do that. So, because of that, sometimes I feel like when Gemini moons express their emotions, but they don't quite know what they're feeling, they'll kind of just express their emotions in a matter-of-fact kind of way, but they won't really like feel their feelings. So let's just say, for example, that a Gemini moon got like a bad grade or something, and they're talking to their friends about it, and they're just kind of like, yeah, I have a bad grade, like, I don't feel so sad about it, but yeah, I got a bad grade today, and then I almost got into a car crash when I went home. Like, they kind of say it like very matter-of-factly, but like if it were like any other moon sign, like a Cancer moon for example, they would just be like, I got a bad grade, and then I almost got hit on the way home, and like, in a way, like a Gemini moon, they're much better at packaging the message of their emotions rather than actually feeling the emotions themselves. And that sucks, because if you can't feel the emotion itself, that emotion will not pass. It doesn't matter how many like times you ship it out into other people, it's still gonna stay there. It's like you're tricking yourself into like wrapping some sort of package and sending it to someone else, but like you don't even know the object that you're wrapping, so like you just kind of wrapped an empty box, and like it just kind of feels empty whenever people receive how you feel, because you didn't actually feel and process the feeling, which is what I think is the most important task for a Gemini moon. The moon also talks about your nurturing parent, and when I think of people with a Gemini moon and I think about their parents, I think of a parent who is very talkative. Maybe this is a parent who's very open-minded, a parent that likes to learn. One thing that a Gemini moon parent will teach you if you have a Gemini moon is that talking things out is going to be important. Communication is always going to be important. And honestly, especially for you, communication is so important when it comes to your emotions. Also with that, on the downside, you may have had a parent who maybe been a little bit gossipy. You may have grew up with them gossiping a lot, and either way, when it comes to having the Gemini like moon and having a parent with that dynamic, there is this whole like sense of like talking and communicating and exchanging. Now, depending on how your childhood went, that exchange could have been like positive or negative. On a negative stance, it could kind of like with the gossiping part, maybe you can look at all that gossiping and just be like, huh, is this what conversations are really like? And then sometimes when it comes to having a Gemini moon, if you were kind of raised on a shallow basis, like gossiping for example, it can be kind of hard for you to really share your emotions just because you were told to kind of like, or shown to express your emotions in a way that were kind of shallow. However, on the best side of things, you know, when people are sad, like, you are the ultimate listener. And sometimes, like, you are all, because, like, in order to talk, you gotta know how to listen. So because of that, you're great at listening. And sometimes, you know, when it comes to people's problems, you're really good at making sense of them. So if someone were really confused about how they felt, you would be great at like cracking the code and kind of telling them, hey, this is how you feel, you know, here's the reason why you felt this way and that way, X, Y, and Z, and stuff like that. So in a way, like with Gemini moon, there's like a positive give or take. So yeah, that's personally my take on the moon in Gemini. But before I go, I kind of want to say that, like, I really do love Gemini, the moon in Gemini. It's like my favorite moon placement. I think it's because I'm a moon in Libra and I just kind of vibe with them. And I think the reason why is just because, like, they're just so good at talking. And they have to be good at talking. They have to be good at telling stories because, like, low-key, their emotions depend on it. And I think it's a good thing, ultimately, because they can be great storytellers. They can be really great conversationalists. You just gotta make sure that whatever you do talk about has some sort of value. And if you are going to talk, you better understand what you're talking about. And yeah. Well, anyways, thank you guys so much for coming to my channel today and just watching my videos. Like, I really, really appreciate every one of you guys that kind of just sit and watch me talk, because I don't know, it's just, it makes me feel kind of flattered that, like, you know, there's so many videos out there and then, like, you guys watch mine. Like, that is something that I feel very, very, very grateful for. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming. I will see you guys in the next video. Don't forget, I appreciate you guys. See ya.